Hello. Welcome to the Chamber of Commerce, Stilly Valley Chamber of Commerce meeting today. I am Jessica Ronhar. I am the president of the chamber this year, and I would just like to thank you and welcome everyone who is here. First off, I would just like to say thank you for coming to our first ever dual chamber luncheon and our annual candidate forum, which is hosted by us, Stilly Valley Chamber, and the Greater Marysville Tulalip Chamber. We would like to have a special thanks to the Marysville Tulalip Chamber's Government Affairs Committee for all the work that they've done getting today's agenda ready and the candidate questions together. We would also like to thank the Living Room Coffee House for our lunch today. So if we can thank them. And I would also like to thank all of our elected officials that are here today. So we have our Arlington's own Mayor Tolbert. I can't talk today, I'm very sorry. It's been a rough morning. I had some first grade and kindergartner issues this morning. So, but Mayor Barb Tolbert is here today, and we'd like to thank her for being here. We'd also like to thank our Arlington City Council members who are here, Sue Weiss and Jessica Stickles. Marysville Council member Mark James is here. Sultan Council member Russell Witta, and our PUD Commissioner Sid Logan. So thank you all for being here today. So today's forum will provide a revealing look at all of the races in the 39th Legislative District. This is including the Senate race and both the House of Representative races for Position 1 and Position 2. The 39th District incorporates most of Snohomish County. So serving today as our moderator is Al Aldrich, and he is the Senior Vice President of Strategies 360. Al is a past chairman of the Marysville Tulalip Board of Directors, and he is on their Government Affairs Committee and currently serves as the ongoing respected member of the Board of Directors. So please join me in welcoming Al Aldrich.
Well, good morning, and thank you for coming today. These candidate forums are very important as a way to educate folks and introduce the various candidates to you. And our particular chamber, the Marysville Tulalip Chamber, has a history of doing candidate forums just about every year. And I've been fortunate to be able to participate in a number of those. So look forward to today's event also. Let's talk about the format a little bit. Each race will begin with after we identify who the candidates are, in each race, we'll begin with a 2-minute opening statement from each candidate. To maintain the two chambers' reputation for impartiality, the candidate to speak first for each race was chosen by a coin flip before we started this morning. Then we'll turn to some questions from the Government Affairs Committee. Alternating first response positions, each candidate will be given a 1-minute response period to the question posed. All questions will be the same for all candidates, or for each candidate. In the second segment, which is always fun, the candidates will pose their own question to their opponent. In this segment, each candidate will have 1 minute to pose their question, and challenger will have 1 minute to respond. Helping our panelists track their response times is this gentleman right here. They will signal when candidates have reached their 1 minute and 30-second remaining marks, and then when their time is up. If you fail to finish quickly after your time is up, you will hear this gentle notification to remind you that your time is up. You probably don't want to hear that. Let's see. The last thing is, today's forum will air on Comcast Channel 21 and Verizon Channel 25 3 times a day beginning September 17th and through October 8th. It'll also be viewable on the Marysville Tulalip Chamber's YouTube channel. So with that, let's first identify who our candidates are before we move to the 2-minute introductions. We have Robert Sutherland and Ivan Lewis for position number 1. Gentlemen, thank you. We have Carolyn Eslick, who is the incumbent, and Eric Halvorson, the challenger, for position number 2. And for the Senate race, in the 39th, we have Keith Wagoner, who is the incumbent, and Klaus Jones. Each candidate will now have a chance to introduce themselves in a 2-minute introductory statement. We will start with Ivan Lewis first and be followed by Robert Sutherland. Ivan?
Thank you. Thank you, chambers and members, guests. Oh, look at that. Thank you. And those watching home, my name is Ivan Lewis. I am a candidate for State Representative, Position 1 for the 39th Legislative District. I am an Eagle Scout, a former volunteer firefighter, an EMT. I own and manage a small business in Mukilteo that I've been managing for, a little over a decade. I have 4 young children. I have a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old whose birthday is actually today. Happy birthday, little one, and a 3-month-old. And my wife, Amanda, and I are raising our kids in Sultan, where we own and operate a little hobby farm. We specialize in ethically raised meat, hogs, turkeys, eggs, that kind of thing. So I realized that our representatives and leaders had lost track, had become too beholden to special interest and party politics than to their constituents, than to the hardworking families and people and communities that make up our districts. And I can do better. I have committed to putting people first. That's the plan, putting people and families and communities first, which is the reason why the Everett Herald endorsed me, saying that I would make the best choice to represent the people of the 39th District. I have a strong belief that this shouldn't be taken lightly. Our children are watching, and their future absolutely depends on the choices that we make today.
Ivan, thanks. Robert, please go ahead.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm Robert J. Sutherland, and I would like to make one thing perfectly clear. I have the first dibs on one of his turkeys come November. I am an Air Force veteran right out of high school. I joined the military at 17, served a couple years. Later, I went to Gonzaga University, where I earned my degree in biochemistry. Moved out here and spent my career researching DNA and developing cancer therapies. I retired in 2009 and surprised many of my family and friends when I entered politics. I'm not a politician. I'm a scientist, but I'm a concerned American citizen of what we see at the national level and at the local level as well. So I entered politics, and I ran my first race in 2014 for U.S. Congress, again in 2016, and here we are, 2018 for state rep in the 39th. And the 39th, as many of you may know, is within that first congressional district. Why am I running? Why am I running for Congress? Why am I running for state rep? Like my friend and opponent, Ivan, I too have 4 children. Mine are a little bit older, my youngest being 19 and attending college right now. And I am concerned, as many of you are, I'm sure, about the future not only of our country, but of our state. We look to Olympia here locally to do the things that we want government to do for us, as far as maintaining our roads, relieving traffic congestion, building bridges where necessary so that we can keep the traffic going, removing traffic lights. We're, in my opinion, we're being overly taxed on our property, our homes, our automobiles for our registration tabs and so forth. And many people I talk to, thousands and thousands of people, agree with me on these issues, let alone education for our children. Too many of our kids are falling through the cracks when it comes to education. And so to help my children in their future, these are concerns of mine, and this is what motivates me for running for office. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. We'll turn to the position 2 candidates now, and first up will be Eric Halvorson.
Hi there. My name's Eric. I'm running for position 2. I am an accountant. I used to have my own firm, and now it's a partnership. Pete called me one day. He said, "There's no point in both of us doing this in different offices. Let's just do it together." So now we have a partnership. I have about 200 or so small business clients. I help them stay in business. My wife is a hospice physician, so I have a keen insight into the state of healthcare. We run a rescue farm just outside of Monroe, so I know what it's like to care for livestock and work the land. And in 2 weeks from yesterday, we will be welcoming our third child into the, that has put education and economic stability right in the top of my mind. So that's why I'm running, and I look forward to the questions.
Thanks, Eric. Carolyn?
Thank you, and good morning, and thank you very much for hosting this today. It gives everyone a chance to really get to know their candidates. My name is Carolyn Eslick, and I come from Sultan, Washington. I moved to Washington in the late 70s to buy a business. And I owned the Dutch Cup restaurant for 20 years on Highway 2. Some of you remember that restaurant. I learned very quickly that it was important to get out of those four walls as a business owner and get to know the community. And I also realized that we didn't have a chamber going on during those years. So I have been a happy chamber member for many, many, many years, and I always promote it. I come from not only the business world, but also I was appointed to the city council for 6 years, and then I ran for mayor and was mayor for 10 years. And in September, John Koster resigned his position, and I threw my hat in the ring, and I was appointed on September 20th. So I have been in Olympia now, and I realized that it was the best place for me. I have decided to, of course, join the candidates again so that I can continue this. The voice for transportation needed to be louder than it has been. And living on Highway 2 for many years and taking 522 for many years, I realized that we were not being heard. We have got to find solutions for our transportation, and it's capacity solutions that we need. So that's the message I'm taking down to Olympia, along others, and you'll be hearing more about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. We'll turn to the Senate race now, and first up is Keith Wagoner.
First of all, I want to thank you all for coming to this important event today. I'm Senator Keith Wagoner, and it was my privilege to represent the 39th Legislative District in the past legislative session and be your voice in Olympia, and also to bring home millions of dollars to our community that went to projects that are important to us. Why should you support me? Because I'm an effective leader who gets things done. I stood for your rights in Olympia. I stood for property rights. I stood for Second Amendment rights. I stood for the right to your own morals and religious beliefs. I stood for law and order and supported our first responders and our police force. I worked to get market-based solutions to affordable housing and for solutions for our epidemic of addiction and behavioral health. I understand our rural and small city needs, and I can work across party lines. I want to go back to Olympia to continue working on all of these issues and many more for you. It's a common claim of candidates that they can work across party lines, but I've proven it. 5 years in city council and 2 years as the mayor of Cedar-Woolley, I had the opportunity to work with many legislators and county officials in both parties. After I was given the #1 nomination for my party, I was appointed by a unanimous decision of 17 county council members and county commissioners. That means I got every Republican's vote and every Democrat's vote. I receive that level of confidence because I have a lifetime of public service and working collaboratively towards solutions. There's a reason that I have the endorsement of every mayor in Skagit County, where they know me best, why I have Dan Christensen's endorsement and former Representative John Koster's endorsement. They know me, they've worked with me, and they know I'm the right choice for the 39th. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Klaus?
Good morning, and thank you for being here. My name's Klaus. I'm working to become the first Democratic senator in the 39th District for more than 25 years. I'm a high school teacher at Concrete High School. I'm a married father of 3, and frankly, the children are what sponsored me to get involved with this. It's interesting to me that probably everyone in the room has one of these, and part of one of these has a calculator on it. But isn't it interesting when you vote and send people to Olympia, they seem to forget how to use that. How many times have you been told of all the things they're going to do for you and cut taxes? This thing's going to show you that that doesn't work. And if you think it does work, look at your property tax statement this year. The way our state government works is every time one of these big companies goes down to Olympia to get a tax cut, the budget is in two halves, schools and not schools. So every time they do that, half of it goes out of the schools, and it drops, and it drops, and it drops, until the courts get involved. And McCleary says, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that to our kids. And you put it all the way back up there. And what you found was, what happened to your property tax statements? They went way up. You know what? That's only half of it. What about all of this stuff that they haven't taxed you on yet? We have over 700 loopholes out there. We need to close the loopholes that are not protecting the poor, people on fixed incomes, and find out how much money we really have coming in. Then we have to figure out how much money it actually takes to fully fund government, and then we can talk about what we're going to do. But until we know how much money we have and how many commitments we've already made, I really can't make any promises. My promise is transparent government, and I'm going to try to keep the promises everybody else before me has already made. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn to our first question now, and we'll start with the Senate candidates on this question. The question is, what do you see as the main issues for the 39th Legislative District? And of those, what do you see as the top priority, and what would be your strategy to approach that top priority? Klaus, you go first on this one.
Whether we like it or not, government is about money, and it works better when you have more money. Now, we read in all the headlines about how great our economy is doing, unprecedented growth, unprecedented stock markets. Then why isn't our government fully funded? Well, it's because the people that are creating those profits aren't benefiting from those profits. And somehow, when the economy does well, we all need to share in that. And when the economy is not doing so well, we all need to share in that too. And frankly, we're not doing that. So frankly, the biggest thing we need to do is close the loopholes and find out what resources we're supposed to have, figure out what funded mandates we have and fund those, and then figure out what we do next. Anything else would actually be misleading you. Thank you.
Keith, same question for you. What do you see as the main issues in the district? And of those, what's your top priority and your strategy to approach it?
So the 39th is a geographically big district, and the issues are not the same in every part of the district. So we have some issues that apply up north and some issues that apply in the south. In the north, we have property rights and water acquisition issues and problems with wildlife. Down here, we have some problems, some very big problems with transportation that need to be addressed. And across the board, we have the opioid epidemic and affordable housing. But I'll just stick with transportation because that's one of my key items that I think is low-hanging fruit. I want to get the simplest thing fixed first, and that's 522. 522, if you've ever had to go across it, is an absolute failure of government for 20 years, where we go from 4-lane roads down to a 2-lane road for 3 miles and then back to 4 lanes. So that's my first priority, is to take money from non-motorized things like bicycle lanes and trails, not that I don't like those, but we have to put our money where the most people are going to be affected. So the transportation issue isn't just a problem of getting to and from work. It's a mental health issue. It steals from our children's time with our parents. And down in Monroe, and probably up here on Highway 9, we have the same problem. Our school children aren't even getting to school on time. They're habitually late because we haven't solved the simple problem of transportation. After 522, I like to see the Monroe bypass get through, and then we're going to work on State Route 2 and State Route 9. There are many other problems that I addressed earlier. You can't really put all your eggs in one basket when you go to Olympia. It's just the reality that you have to make choices, and that's where I've chosen to make my initial move. In the last legislative session, I was able to work very well with the Transportation Committee to get emergency funds up in Lyman when we had a road slide there. It's important that you have relationships down there to get things done. And I think in my short time in the legislature, I've proved that I can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. We'll turn now to Carolyn and Eric. Same question. What are the top issues in your view on the 39th Legislative District? Of those, what is the number one top priority, and what's your strategy to approach it? Carolyn goes first this time.
Thank you. Of course, transportation is huge. It involves everyone sitting in this room. So, and Senator Wagoner said it very eloquently, and so I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to talk to you today about is mental health. as we shake our head, don't we, Mayor? It affects everyone in this room. I have, on September 20th, when I was appointed, I was given 2 committees. One was capital budget. Didn't realize at the moment how wonderful that was until I got down to Olympia. The second was early learning and human services. So I get to deal with issues, not only about mental health, but foster care and early learning, all those issues that have affected my community and affects everyone in the room. Mental health, we spent lots of money last year. We threw $180 million at mental health. I've spent the last few months going and researching the facilities and programs because I wanted to make sure that our money is being spent well. And frankly, I don't think it is yet. We have much more work to do, and I support our family support centers that we just started one a couple of years ago over the OSO, and I am supporting a budget item that will allow a mental health provider to go to the schools in the rural areas. We're working with the family support centers at this moment to bring that together and bring it down to Olympia. If we don't have a handle on that, our children are not going to be successful, and I believe they can, even with mental health problems. We just have been doing a disservice to them. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Eric, same question to you. Top issues.
Well, everybody here so far has had a decent explanation of the top issues in our district. When I'm out doorbelling with people, I've actually changed what I ask them. What are your main priorities besides transportation? Because they all say transportation. Some of them care about taxes. Some of them care about education. As far as the transportation goes, I think 522 does need to be fixed. It's 4 lanes most of the way. We need to add 2 more lanes. I mean, I drive 522 every day. I'm well aware of how terrible it is. And it's not just the actual highway itself. It's all of the Google Maps and Waze tell everybody all the side streets to get around. And some of these parents, yesterday as I was driving home, they had a genuine look of fear on their face as people are zipping by where their kids play at 50 miles an hour just so they could bypass all these traffic. So it is a big deal. As far as the rest of transportation goes, Highway 2 is a big deal. I am lucky enough, I live on Highway 2 and I'm lucky enough to have a turn lane into my street. Otherwise, I'd probably be dead by now. My neighbor does not, and he has to choose between getting rear-ended or getting T-boned every time he tries to get into his house. So I think just adding turn lanes, if we're not going to add capacity, which has a whole nother set of issues, I think just adding safety would be the biggest concern.
Thanks, Eric. Same question for our position 1 candidates. Robert, you go first on this one.
I always like to put, I have 4 kids, as I mentioned earlier, and I always like to put my kids and your kids and everyone's kids first on priority. It's hard to actually say this is the number 1 problem, but I usually start with our children because to me that's my motivation for running. And education, I believe we can do a lot better in education by giving parents a choice. We know that the more affluent among us, they have a choice. They can take their kids and send them to a private school, and they get to pick what private school that they send their kids to. And so they have school choice. A lot of us who already pay the taxes and can't afford that extra burden of paying for a private school, we fall under a different category. And this is where I'd like to concentrate on to help parents like myself and like many of you have a choice for our children. One size does not fit all for many kids. I raised 4 kids, and they were all different. And it would be nice if we had more educational choices for parents to be able to send their kids, whether that be a private school, a home school, or whatever, a religious school. I would like to see some tax dollars that they pay. They already pay into the system. I would like to see their tax dollars being able to follow the child so that they can pick the education of their choice. And my wife, I'm going to switch topics quickly, she commutes 4 hours a day, 2 hours to and 2 hours back home, 4 hours a day in traffic. If I fail to mention the traffic gridlock, I will be sleeping in the living room with my 2 Yorkies tonight. When I worked in Seattle, we both did. We used to ride together. With 4 kids, that was what I call our date time. In traffic, driving to and from work. But it has gotten much worse since I've retired. She reminds me of that almost every day. We need to start building bridges over busy intersections, removing lights and stop signs. We need more center turn lanes on our state routes and highways. And we need right turn lanes, center turn lanes, and bridges so that we can keep the traffic flowing. This costs money, but over time this can be done. We spend a lot of money on taxes to get these things done, and they're not being done.
Thanks, Robert. Ivan, same question to you. Top issues in the 39th and your number one issue and how you'd approach it.
Thank you. So families. It's family issues. It's issues of how do I ensure that I have a family wage job that pays for the things I need and afford the house in the place I want to live, and can get to work and back in a reasonable amount of time that doesn't cut into that family time, and health insurance and health care that guarantees that I'm never going to have to worry about going bankrupt. Those issues should be first and center always. Our number one priority should always be the things that directly impact our very rural, very spread out communities. So for me, the number one is healthcare, because I think it's a priority order. If we can ensure that we have one thing taken care of and don't have to worry about it, it makes it easier for us to shift the priority to the next thing. Healthcare, we have an opportunity in Washington State with HB 1026, universal healthcare, to guarantee that every individual has access to healthcare without the burden of copays or deductibles or networks. This is a real option in Washington State, an option that will that could lead us to an absolute guarantee. And once that happens, we can step down the priority list. So that is my absolute number one priority, is seeing a guarantee of universal health care with absolute, that we have a protection, that no one has to go bankrupt because of a bad diagnosis.
Thank you. With 2 chambers sponsoring this forum, you shouldn't be surprised that our next question deals with economic development. In the 39th, what do you see as the biggest economic development issue, and how do you plan to deal with this? We'll start at that end, and Ivan, you get to go first on the question about the biggest economic development issue and how do you plan to deal with it?
So for me, it leads to a structure to fit within. Let me be specific. Infrastructure, building codes, community development, those are the structure that we fit within, that allows us to build. And in the 39th district, we know is a huge piece of the 39th is recreation. It builds that expanding edge. So the most effective thing that I see is recognizing the diversity of the 39th and the fact that we need a structure that helps support that. So, specifically, tax reform. It is a massive problem that we have a tax code that has been set up to nickel and dime. We have a reason why we have rejected an income tax year after year when it comes up. And it's because we all know that if we add an income tax to Washington State's taxing code, it will not replace something. It will just be in addition to. That's a concern. And as a business owner, I'm very concerned about having these ever-expanding options to reach into the cookie jar. So we need to take a hard look at the way that we tax business. That's a service-based business. Business and occupation tax is a big piece of my profit. I know it's a small piece of the game, but it's a big piece of my profit. We need to take a hard look at when we add taxes. And if we're going to add something that is a more effective taxing mechanism, it has to replace taxes that are more regressive. It cannot be in addition to. If we want to stimulate our economy and we want to build growth, we take a hard look at the way that we tax our businesses and our people.
Thank you. Robert, same question to you. Biggest economic development issue, and how do you plan to deal with it?
I'm going to agree with my opponent on one thing, and that is the business tax, the B&O tax that I hear from thousands of business owners that they have to, the burden that it causes them. So I think we can cross the aisle on that and realize that this is a very unfair tax and a burden on our small businesses. But I'm going to jump over and talk about, we need housing, we need affordable housing. And we see a lot of that going on with the construction of all the new units that we see. But a problem that I see, and that, again, many constituents of mine are concerned with, is that we seem to be building a lot of housing, but we're not building additional hospitals, schools, and the roads are clogging up. And so it has to be a more balanced approach, in my opinion. We can't just move people in and not allow for the additional traffic in school. The school class sizes are growing and things like that. So housing is yet another of those economic development issues that I think we can do a better job on. As far as bringing economic stimulus businesses to the 39th, again, as it's been mentioned, we've got rural and then we've got suburban areas, and so each of these are going to need to be addressed differently. Up in the more rural areas, if we can bring back sustained forest development, where we can allow people to go in and selectively harvest some of the forest to reduce the excess fuel that is just building up in our forests, and then we see these super fires that start up from lightning strikes or man-made. That will create some extra jobs, high-paying, livable wage jobs for our rural communities, and in our suburban communities, high-tech. I come from the biotech industry, and I'll tell you, during my years in that industry, it was a struggling industry, and so maybe we can concentrate on that a little bit as well. Don't blow that horn.
Thanks, Robert. Eric, same question to you. Top economic development issue, and how do you plan to deal with it?
Just focused on the horn there. So I've spent the last 4 minutes trying to figure out the biggest economic development issue, and they're all interconnected. So if somebody wanted to come into the 39th and build a factory, awesome. How would we get his workers how would we get her workers to work? Well, then there's traffic problems. So if you build houses closer to the factory, where would her kids go to school? Well, you can't just necessarily put new portables. My own child's elementary school, they cannot add more portables because the school is on septic. And to put more kids there would be a health code violation. So everything's all connected. You can't just look at one part of the issue, like building 2 lanes on 522, without dealing with everything else that goes along with it. And I think having a good grasp of the whole organic problem and dealing with it all as a systemic solution would be awesome.
Thanks, Eric. Carolyn, same question to you about top economic issue and your approach to it.
So I think we're doing a good job on economic development. We weren't doing such a good job 10 years ago, but now we're doing the right things. I think job training is really important, but we're doing that well with WorkSource and Workforce. We are starting through the partnership of Marysville, Arlington, and Everett Community College, starting a North County training center for trades. They're looking at training in electrical field, the plumbing, contracting, and catching those kids in high school while they're still there and be able to train them instead of waiting 10 years after they have gone out into the world and skipped around for a while. I think that economic development is a multifaceted issue, and it's amazing that so many people get it now. 20 years ago, when I applied for a job called with Snohomish County Economic Development Council as a business consultant. I was the one that was chosen out of 70 people because I could explain economic development, because there is no one thing that makes it up. Everything. We have to have safe streets, and we're working well with that. Homeless issues are still a concern, but we are working on that. So I think that if we just continue doing the things that we are doing, we are going to be in great shape. B&O tax, get rid of it. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Turn to our Senate candidates now. Keith, you'll go first on that question. Top economic development issue.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn's right. The economic development is here, and it's going to keep coming. We have to plan for that and work forward so we can keep people coming here. And I think affordable housing is one of the issues that I worked on in the last legislative session, because we have jobs in our communities, but we don't have affordable places for people to live, which means both parents have to get a job, which means essentially you have nobody at home, which is so important to young children in education. I worked on a bill in the last session that would have allowed every city in Washington State to be part of the solution for affordable housing. It received great support in the Senate, but was killed in the House on the other side. One of the most important things government can sometimes do, and you've probably all heard the adage, lead, follow, or get out of the way. We need to get out of the way on economic development and let the market do its thing. We need to lower barriers, and that was the intent of my bill that did not make it. I'm going to go back there and get it through next time. I want to talk about transportation again. If we have economic development in our communities, people don't have to drive to Seattle anymore. So we're solving that problem. So another get out of the way thing is, if you want to kill the economy quick, put a carbon tax on our fuel. Our entire economy runs on energy. And if you lay a carbon tax across the state on everybody, on your farmers, on your people who live out in rural areas, you're doing a great disservice to them, and you're going to throttle our economy. So I worked hard to make sure that didn't get through in the last session, and I'll go back there and do it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Klaus?
Thank you. I volunteered to participate in the Economic Development Commission for Concrete, where we established an economic development community. And I'm a founding member of the Economic Development Council there now. And in Skagit County, where I live, we have a very vibrant tradition of economic development. We have the Economic Development Association of Skagit County, EDASC, which does a very fine job up there. And when I hear about economic development, the first thing I think about is perspective. Listen to how many times you've heard today people talk about transportation. Do you realize in the United States about 80% of our population lives in urban areas, where in most of the other countries it's about 60%? When everyone else is talking about, hey, we need more roads to get more people to work and back, I'm thinking, well, maybe not, because the human body, when traffic flows from your heart, they call that arteries, and they're roughly the same size as the veins that come back. And we're not sitting here with one giant arm and one giant leg on one side and nothing on the other side. Well, it seems to me what we need to do is we need to develop businesses and put them in the communities where people live, instead of requiring them to leave those communities and go somewhere else. And that comes back to money. We need to fully fund the government so we can do that. Small businesses. Most small businesses fail in the first 5 years. Why are you even taxing a business that fails in the first year? You should probably be doing no taxes the first year, 20 the second year, 40, 60, 80 until they've been in business 5 years. I feel that, how do you replace taxes when you don't even know how much taxes are supposed to be there? Ivan Lewis called it right, that the average voter does not trust that we're not going to replace the income tax with the taxes we already have. We won't be able to do that until we close all the tax loopholes, figure out how much we have, figure out what our commitments are, and then we'll be in a place to have the conversation about moving to a tax that no longer taxes working families and the poor. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third question for all the candidates. What makes you a better choice for this position than your opponent? We will start with Klaus. Up to 2 minutes for the answer, as we've been doing.
I would love to say modesty, but the right honorable gentleman next to me is actually quite qualified as a government official. In fact, one of the things that I want to point out is you're looking at your leadership team. A combination of the 6 people in front of you will be your leadership team. And it really shouldn't matter whether we're sitting here as a Democrat or sitting here as a Republican. What we should be doing is we should be listening to you. My job really isn't to tell you what I think. My job is to ask you what you think and to be your voice down there. So I think what really sets me apart is I'm not a career politician. I'm a teacher. I spend all day listening to kids and how I can help make their lives more successful. I want to take that and leverage it with all of you in the room and find out what do I need to do to fix the problems you've already had. If you look at the last 5 years, for the last 5 years, all of the people that you elected from the 39th were all Republicans, and 4 out of the 5 years had a Republican majority in Olympia. Are the problems gone? If they're not, maybe you might want to vote on the other side and see what we can do for you. Because frankly, I am bringing a new perspective, and I'm very positive about what our outlook is going to be, and I'm not going to make promises to you that I can't keep. Thank you.
Thanks, Klaus. Keith, same question to you. What makes you a better candidate for the position you're running for?
Okay, I have a lifetime of leadership and getting things done. I went to the United States Naval Academy, a leadership school. I served in the United States Navy for 23 years as a naval officer and a helicopter pilot, leading the finest Americans that there are out there. I have a master's degree in global leadership from from University of San Diego. I progressed in the Navy because I got things done. I served in our U.S. Embassy in Tokyo because I got things done. Then I came back to our community after 23 years and retired, and I got involved in the community at the grassroots level. I didn't start in government. I started in youth sports and worked my way up. I was the senior parent dad. I was the equipment director. I got onto city council, and I got on to being the mayor for 2 years before I was appointed to this position. I have a lifetime of service and accomplishments. I think Klaus, as a teacher, is in a great place. I have it on good authority. He's an excellent teacher, one of the best. But I've trained my whole life to be a leader in government, and I'm doing it, and I've been effective in Olympia. So unless there's something I'm doing wrong, which I haven't heard yet, I think that you should send me back, because it takes time to get up to speed. You have to build relationships. Nobody gets anything done by themselves down there. You must work with your seatmates, like Carolyn and Representative Christensen. You have to work with your committee, and you have to work across the aisle. It takes time to develop those relationships, and I'm at the beginning of it. I think I had a very successful session and brought back good things to the community. So I have the experience advantage. I agree. I think Klaus is a wonderful person, and we're going to run our campaigns, yawning, in a respectful way, and we're going to show everybody how you do a nice campaign where you don't throw mud at each other. We've agreed to that, and I appreciate it.
Thanks. Carolyn, what makes you a better choice for this position than your opponent?
So the experience that I've had, that really is the bottom line. I grew up on a farm, so I've got experience of farm. I moved to Washington and 30 years ago. So I had a chance to, at that time, to buy and run a business. Lots of experience in that. I know what it's like to have a bad year in the restaurant business and have to refinance your house just to make payroll because you're committed to your business. As all the businesses sitting in this room, I am sure are. Not everybody has that experience. And when you go to Olympia, you have to reach back in your experiences to make decisions. Not only do you do that, but you also have to reach out to your constituents. Many times I was texting the chief of police, the fire chief, the superintendent of schools, to ask them questions. What would you do under these circumstances? What do you suggest? It's important to have those relationships when you go down to Olympia. I've also had the experiences even before going down there to lobby Olympia for many years. As the mayor of City of Sultan, every year we made trips to Olympia, and every year we were successful in getting the budgets that the requests that we requested brought to our little town. It's important that we are there to bring back the bacon, as they say. That is not a bad thing. That is a great thing. That is our tax money, and we need to be able to bring it back. I know that Cedar Woolley just got money this last year for the first time because they asked for it. Do you know how many little cities and towns that don't know that they just asked for it? And so it's important to have the experience that I have to continue the work that I plan to do for the next few years. I love doing what I'm doing. I love the fact that I've come to this stage of my life where I can give back tenfold. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, same question to you. What makes you the better choice for this position?
I made a conscious decision when I started running that I was going to run as a candidate and not as an opponent. Carolyn's nice. I mean, she's a nice person. So I don't know that there's anything about me that is better than Carolyn, but I will say that there is probably an advantage to sending somebody to Olympia who's going to be on the Democrat side of the building. You've seen the news. There's a chance that the Democrats are going to hold a majority coming up. And I think it would be best to have somebody in that room who can advocate while it's happening, in the room where it happens, rather than from across the building. There's bound to be an advantage of that, and it's not like I'm going to be going down there and talking to all my new friends from Green Lake and Capitol Hill. Hey guys, what are we going to vote on today? No, you need somebody in the room to represent the people of the 39th. This is where my family lives. My friends are here, all of my neighbors, and I'm certainly not going to throw any of that away just to make friends from Seattle.
Thanks, Eric. Robert, same question to you. What makes you the better choice for this position?
Well, I fear if I give a good answer, I'm going to lose my position in line for the turkey in November. So that's a tough one. I don't like building myself up and bringing someone else down. In fact, I like the answer that we just heard, that I don't consider my opponent an opponent. We're just two guys running in a race with our own ideas. Some of them are similar and some of them are different. When I'm a Republican, my opponent is a Democrat, so there are some differences, obviously. When I served in the military out of high school, I was not political. I didn't serve Republicans only or Democrats. I served everybody. When I went to college and earned my degree in biochemistry and became a scientist, developing cancer drugs, I didn't serve some of the people. I was viewing that as serving whoever needed the drug. And so I have come into politics with that exact same mindset. I think most of us agree that there's too much divisiveness in politics, and it's hurting us. It's hurting our families and our kids and our communities. And so I look forward to going to Olympia and making friends of anyone that will have me. I don't care what letter you put by your name. And one of and some of the more obvious differences that we might have being in different parties is I will refer to the Democrats in Olympia, and we've heard a lot about the problems that we're seeing right now. Well, the Democrats have been in charge for decades, and so maybe it's time for a change to see if the Republicans can come in here, like myself, and come up with some solutions. I know talking about building bridges will help traffic, but it's not that simple, and we all know that. You need to come up with the funding, you need to come up with a plan, and let the professionals do their thing. So it's easy for me to say it, but it's hard for it to get done. In biochemistry, I was able to develop DNA extraction purification methods, very complicated stuff. I look to bring that critical thinking to Olympia when elected. So thank you.
Thank you. Ivan, same question to you. What makes you a better choice for this position?
So I have earned a significant stack of endorsements from organizations that believe that I am the best choice. The Washington State Labor Council, Sierra Club, the Everett Herald, just to name a small few. What it comes to with the two of us that we agree on, I think without dispute, is that government's role should be to do what the people cannot. That should be what government is limited to. Where we disagree is what the people are not equipped to handle independently. I believe strongly, unequivocally, that schools and transportation and public transportation and fire services and police and healthcare administration are the role of government, and that they are the most effective when government is allowed and able to be accountable to the voters to do that job. And that is my priority. And I think the thing that separates us the most is that my focus will be to hold our government accountable to us, our neighbors, our constituents, our families, for their responsibility to do their job in administering these services that are government-level services, not pushing them off onto private and making them the will of profit.
Thank you. Now we turn to questions for each other. Each candidate will be given up to 1 minute to pose a question to his or her opponent. The candidate's opponent will then have 1 minute to respond to the question before asking his or her question of the opponent. We will start with Ivan. You have up to a minute to pose a question to Robert, which Robert will then have a minute to answer. Ivan?
Okay, so Robert, your website states that you support freezing and capping property taxes and significantly reducing car tabs. But you also state support of expansion to public transit, specifically adding buses, improving roadways, lanes, turn lanes, bridges, which you've mentioned today. My question is, given your intent to reduce revenue, what specific programs or services would you propose eliminating or reducing to pay for those improvements?
Yeah, that's a good question. We need to pay for everything that we're proposing. I happen to believe that if you take less money from people, there's more money in the economy. And so as businesses grow because of a booming economy, then there's more tax revenue. We've seen this time and time again. I happen to believe that we're paying an excessive amount for our property taxes. And so I'm calling for a freeze in property taxes on existing homes. Now, that's not covering the new homes that we see being built. I don't want to see people taxed out of their homes, and that's what we're seeing going on right now. So to answer that question, the more money that we can put back into the hands of the working class, the middle class, the working poor, this money will end up back in the economy. This will generate increased tax revenue, and that is just one way. It's a complicated question. That's one way we can help pay for these bridges I was talking about.
All right, thank you. Robert, your turn now to pose a question to Ivan, and Ivan will have up to a minute for a response.
I had to write the question down. This is getting into education. If studies were to determine, as I believe they have, that charter schools, home schools, private schools are more effective and more efficient at educating our children, would you support legislation that encourages greater educational choices for parents here in Washington State? And what I mean is allowing parents the educational dollars that they already put into the system to be spent educating their children in the school of their choice. Would you allow the money, the tax dollars, to follow the student? Would you support legislation along those lines?
I support alternative education options in the forms of homeschooling, in the forms of charter schools, private schools. I do not believe that public funding should be deferred from public schooling to those private institutions. So while I support their existence and would never want to see an elimination of the existence of homeschooling, private schooling, and charter schools as private entities, I would not support the use of public funding.
Thank you. Moving to the next position. Eric, you go first, posing a question to Carolyn.
A lot of what we see on TV these days, especially if you are bored and watch a lot of news, the Republicans aren't necessarily making the most awesome name for themselves recently. I don't want to ask you, why why you still call yourself a Republican. But what are your thoughts about being associated, having to stand up and say, yes, that's my team?
Thanks, Eric. That's a really tough question in this day and age. The president just needs to, right. Should I do that again?
Yeah.
I still stand for the Republican policies and mission. 17 years ago, when I decided to run for state representative, I had to choose parties. And I didn't have to do that until then, because I was in the nonpartisan world. I actually researched for 6 months before I determined that I was a Republican. It is not the party, but the person that is creating the problems that we have. If you talk to 10 out of 10 Republicans, I think you'll hear the same story. We still stand for what our mission is about, and stand proudly for it. No, next time when there's a Democrat president, it could be a different story too. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, Carolyn, your turn to pose a question to Eric.
Okay, thank you. So being in Olympia takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. And I was fortunate enough to actually take my husband with me last year and find a place that would accommodate both of us. My concern for Eric is the time away from his family. How do you see that working in your life?
My wife is, I'm just so damn lucky to have found her. My wife is one of the strongest people I know. And I would absolutely not be doing this if it wasn't for her help and support. She is all for this, and she knows exactly what she might be getting into. It takes, I don't know, half an hour every morning and half an hour every night to feed all of the animals on the farm, and she's a champ. We're looking at baby carriers right now because she wants to be able to bring that kid out and feed the animals with her. We're lucky enough that her mother has volunteered to come help us while I'm in session. So I'm in that regards, I'm very fortunate. Having met my wife in the first place, I'm going to say that 2 more times. Just how lucky I am to have her.
Thanks, Eric. Turning to our Senate candidates. Keith, you get the first chance to pose a question to Klaus.
Okay. Klaus, so this kind of goes to your understanding of the commitment and the time required for this job. In a standard year, we spend 105 days in the legislature, and we can be called back by the governor for an additional 30 days at any time. We have one of the biggest top 5 geographical areas, and it takes a lot of time to do the oh so important work. It's grueling, hard, but oh so important work. You're a teacher in concrete, and a darn good one, I'm told. Are you ready to give up a career and leave your kids to do a job that pays 1/3 roughly of what your total compensation is? Are you ready to give that amount of time to the district that it requires to do a good job?
Thank you. My understanding is that teachers have been elected to the legislature before, and the rule of thumb has been that when they're needed to be an Olympiad, they're an Olympiad, and when they're not, they're in a classroom somewhere. I expect to do the same thing. For those of you who don't know, I live up in Marble Mount, which is a long, long ways away, so I'm very likely to have to spend a lot of time away from my family to go down there. And I can tell you this, my wife is totally supportive of me going down to Olympia, but she's not supportive of me going down there and doing a halfway job. So if I go down to Olympia, I'm not going down there for the fun of it.
All right, thank you very much. Our mutual goal today was to present. Oh, I'm sorry, you get a question back. My bad, I jumped ahead. Sorry, Klaus.
Thank you, sir.
Color green, thanks, good question.
Currently, if a school district wants to raise money that's going to increase taxes for the people who live there, they have to go through a levy process, and the voters actually have to approve having their taxes raised before a school can raise them. But if a corporation wants to have their taxes cut, they can go down to Olympia without any notice, they can get it approved, they get their taxes cut, and the voters have no say in it whatsoever. That's resulted in as many as 700 tax loopholes for big businesses in Washington State. Mr. Wagoner, would you support closing the big business tax loopholes and replacing it with corporations going through the same levy process a school has to do before the voters? Thank you.
So yes to the first part of the question. I obviously would want to close loopholes that hurt the system. And going back to the B&O that we talked about earlier, I think B&O, while it's a valid taxing source, should be equal across the board. And government has done a wrong thing by picking winners and losers and cutting it for some corporations we deem more important or bigger and leaving out the little guy. So I think whatever we do should be equal across the board. Now, with respect to changing the system by which people lobby for preferences, I don't see that as being equal to the way we do it with schools. And I've sat on, I'm a member of the Levy Advisory Committee and the Bond Advisory Committee in my school district, so I've worked hard to make sure that our schools are adequately funded. But I like the current system, but I think you're right. We can do better in getting rid of loopholes for favored customers that happen to come in and twist our arm the right way. Thank you for the question.
All right, thank you. Our mutual goal today was to present the candidates and issues in a fair and impartial manner and format that will aid citizens in their decision-making process when casting their ballots. Your vote is extremely important. Weigh your choices carefully and return your vote by November 6th. As a participant in the political process, I will say that it takes guts and hard work to run for the legislature. Would you join me in giving a little applause to our candidates who came today?